Well, I can't really say you're entirely wrong, Max. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the unintended hiatus, but it's been a rough 2 weeks to be honest with you. I have a really busy schedule. The midterms, I have a job, and a couple more obligations to do. And to make matters even worse, this is the second time that I'm recording this audio because my dumbass has deleted the file that I've been working on for the last 2 days. But all of this is like minor inconveniences compared to the torture I received on that ungodly Thursday night. An hour and a half of sheer pain. I can proudly share with you one of my biggest achievements of all time. I survived the finales of both The Rings of Power and She-Hulk. And to make it even more impressive, I watched them both in the span of 8 hours. But here's some leaked footage of me in the aftermath. I'm glad we put aside our differences to make it through these trying times, Pseudo. Not so fast. Don't forget what you did in the last video, Poopy Boy. Don't call me that. Well, I didn't come up with it, but I'm glad that Persephone did. And I will keep calling you Poopy Boy until you get your shit together. I won't let you bully me. Ah, shut up. These fine people want to know the reasons why the Rings of Power sucks balls. They're not here for a therapy session. Well, maybe one day, but not today. However, I'm not gonna recap the season or the finale. God knows I don't have the energy to watch one more second of this show. I can barely watch the scenes that I have to use in post-production. Plus, I have a few announcements to make towards the end, so stick around for some big updates. So without any further ado, let's dive straight into the 5 reasons why the Rings of Power is a dumpster fire. Number 1, the writing. Well, to be fair, some of the writing issues with this show are not entirely the fault of Amazon. I mean, they only had the rights to the appendices, which, to my understanding, is just the history and mythology of Middle-earth without any dialogue. While it gives Amazon a built-in excuse for any fuck-up they might do, they can say, well, Tolkien didn't specify what happened here, and since we didn't have the rights for more stuff, we had to come up with a few things to fill in the gaps. It also gives them enough freedom to play around with the events, but they're walking a fine line between filling gaps and vandalization. But all of this relies on the competence of the people in charge. But when you have clueless hacks, you're gonna end up with original characters who are a ripoff of other characters and convoluted storylines that hinge on massive coincidences. You don't believe me? Okay, let's take a look at the biggest example of this season. Imagine if Galadriel didn't drift near Sauron. If that didn't happen, we wouldn't get the Numenor plotline. And also, the big battle of the season wouldn't have happened in the first place. Instead, it would have been a massacre because there's no Numenor to save the day. And the rings wouldn't have been made without Sauron telling the greatest smith of all time to alloy mithril with other metals. Now, despite the idiocy of these events, do you understand how many of them rely on one almost impossible coincidence? It seems you forgot that the sea is always right. Well, I can't argue with that logic. But you know what would have been logical? If Amazon hired people with excellent resumes to handle a story as big as The Lord of the Rings. Now, if I was spending $1 billion and dealing with one of the largest fan bases of all time, I would tread very carefully, and I would make sure to bring the best of the best for such a massive investment. But there's one question we all must ask. Is this a story that needed to be told? Well, kind of. I mean, I personally wouldn't mind seeing the forging of the rings and the defeat of Morgoth and the rise of Sauron. I would like that kind of story, but if others don't agree, I can see why. I can't say that you're wrong, but I get your position. But here's another way they could have tackled the story. What if they spent some time on the war against Morgoth instead of glossing over it in a shitty-ass prologue? And since this is the story of the Second Age, which is about 3,000 years, compressing all of these events into a single point in time is definitely a bad idea. But consider this. What if they played loosely with the time of the events instead of that comet which told everyone that the events are all taking place at the same time just like Game of Thrones did? Here's another one. What if we got more meaningful plot lines? Now, I'm not claiming that these are like excellent creative choices. God knows they'll raise their own share of problems, or that I know all the mythology to create a good story out of it. But at least these will fix some of the major problems with this godforsaken story. If everything was happening at the same time, how the fuck are the characters fast traveling from one point to the next in like 5 seconds? God damn it, I'm not doing this again. Moving on. Number 2, the characters. You know, I could sit here and go into some carefully articulated metaphor about how bad these characters are, but nothing is better than the simple, plain truth. The characters fucking suck. Instead of legendary heroes, we got one-dimensional cardboard cutouts if the cutting was done by a 9-year-old using a pipe with the depth of a puddle of piss. The characters range from uninteresting to borderline psychos. Well, not like me, but in a bad way. The women of this show are a fantasization of a demented third-wave feminist with daddy issues, while the men range from dumbasses to emasculated errand boys to Joe Biden. In short, they are
a babbling, bumbling band of baboons.
And of course, the worst character I think I've ever seen. Galadriel is a smug, entitled, genocidal Karen with a single-digit IQ, and what's even more pathetic, this sad attempt at giving her a character arc that she ended up the real villain of the show. Also, she unlocked a new achievement by becoming the first actress to speak without moving her lips. As for the rest of the cast, most of the actors are doing a shit job, but I can only feel bad for the actors because they were handed a script that doesn't even qualify as fan fiction written by a teenager with ADHD who just finished watching the Jackson trilogy. Now look, The Rings of Power was gonna have a problem whoever was in charge. The Rings of Power is a prequel, meaning everyone knows where the story is gonna end, who each character is, and whether they'll survive or not. With that in mind, I'll cut Amazon some slack. Not too much, just like a tad bit. Because it's really difficult to deviate from the way Tolkien wrote them because the characters are so damn popular. So the only option they have is to introduce characters of their own or using less popular characters who weren't really given much depth in the books. Because no one is asking that Amazon tell the story exactly how it went in the books. We all know that's impossible, but this has to be done with 2 conditions in mind. 1, they have to fit within the story, and 2, you have to introduce them without undermining the characters Tolkien wrote, and well, we all saw how that played out. Number 3, the Harfucks. These midgets are a terrible group of sociopaths. Their entire plotline is pointless. You could replace 95% of their screen time with clips of just stop oil dumbasses and it still would be better. You know what? I think you went too far. I mean, they're bad, but they're not that bad. Well, that could be up for debate, but not now. Don't distract me, poopy boy. Now, where was I? Yes. You would lose nothing of value if they weren't in the show. They were only added to push diversity and because the Lord of the Rings had hobbits traveling across Middle-earth. I mean, you could argue that their presence was necessary to introduce Gandalf. Well, maybe, but that shouldn't take more than 20 minutes of screen time. But that's not the real problem with these midgets. The main disaster is that these are not the good guys. They're villains. And what's even worse is that whichever dumb fuck wrote this show doesn't realize the sketchy morality of these assholes. If it flew under the radar of the writers, well, what about the directors? Or the producers? Or the actors? Or even the fucking editors? Who made this show? A group of retards? Number 4, the lack of identity. Now, this sentence is a crime in of itself. How much of a talentless, clueless hack do these showrunners have to be to make The Lord of the Rings, the most inspirational fantasy book of all time, look cheap, uninspired, and inferior to other fantasy shows? For fuck's sake, nothing about this show is original. It reminds me of that time when I copied my friend's homework word for word. But I was scolded by the teacher, not because I cheated, but for being a dumbass and making it obvious. Well, technically that was him, not me. I didn't exist at that time. Dumbass. Why did you say that publicly? That's private. Hey, poopy boy, shut up. Let's take a look at some examples. Well, from the Jackson trilogy, we have an archer elf, and we have the cavalry arriving with the sun rising in their backs despite them coming from the west. And from Game of Thrones, trying desperately to have convoluted shocking twists and revelations. A catchy tagline.
The sea is always right.
Like, what the fuck is that even supposed to mean? Why is the sea always right? Like, is the sea a contrarian asshole? And from The Matrix, we have preposterous fight scenes. God fucking damn it. This is even worse than She-Hulk and Batwoman. At least these two shows went into farcical territory that you would have to be an idiot if you took them seriously. Number 5. The PR. Whoever was in charge of PR took a list of how to market a show and did the exact opposite. Instead of ensuring the fans that they're gonna get a good story, the entire marketing campaign became about the skin color of the actors and if they fuck people from the same or the opposite sex. Listen to me, people. At this point, everyone, including Amazon, knows what kind of controversy this will stir. Hell, I'll even go and claim that this was their intention all along, to use this as a preemptive shield against criticisms. Well, while it's true that there are very few racist people, I'm sure they don't even make up 1% of most fandoms. So to try and label each and every one of us as a racist bigot is nothing but a degenerate, pathetic attempt to claim the moral high ground. And that's rich coming from a $1 trillion company who runs sweatshops in China. But not only that, they even tried to defend the show in real time. And when you try to defend and explain your story outside of its medium, then your fuck up was so damn large that even the Access Media will turn their backs on you once the show was over and their money was already in the pocket. And these are my 5 reasons why the Rings of Power is such a stinking turd. Now, despite how difficult it may sound, the plot of the show is actually fixable by canceling this season and rebooting the whole thing. But all of this could have been avoided by doing one thing, and one thing only: telling a good story. It might sound simple and easy for you people, but for those leeching, talentless hacks who piggyback on the accomplishments of creative giants, it sounds like the most Herculean of tasks. Now, before I let you go, I have a few announcements that interest you. First of all, I thank each and every one of you for getting us to 2,000 subscribers. Now, I ask you to put your phone on your cheek or stick your cheek to the TV if you're watching on the TV, because the pseudo-intellectual himself is about to give you a kiss on the cheek. Ew, dude, what are you doing? That's weird. My apologies. I think I went a little overboard with this one. But I guess my sincere thanks to each and every one of you might be enough. Second of all, I'll be streaming God of War Ragnarok when it comes out. I can't wait for Kratos to fight the God of Thunder. Well, the other God of Thunder. And finally, the people have spoken. And I'm a guy who believes in democracy until you say something that I really don't like. Now, the people are asking for a special Q&A video. But the only problem is, I only got 2 questions. One of them wants me to do an apology video despite me not doing anything wrong. Or at least so far. And the other's asking me for feet pics. Like, who the hell do you think I am, dude? AOC? But after all this, what do I know? I'm just a schizophrenic taking a shit who occasionally snaps. Follow me on Twitter. Peace.